tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Honor to him, the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. My utmost respect to the perfectly enlightened Samma Sambuddha, the noble doctrine of the Buddha, and the noble Mahasangha, the disciples of the Buddha. Dear Dhamma friends, today I'm here with Venerable Bhante American Sumana, and he is an American Theravada Buddhist monk. He was ordained in Sri Lanka, Galduva forest tradition, and he is now he is originally from Washington DC and now traveling in USA. He is currently visiting Los Angeles area, and I have met Venerable Bhante Sumana quite a few occasions through Dhamma USA, and he was very kind to offer some Dhamma sharings already in the past. And so today he was kind enough to come live, and I would like to invite Venerable American Sumana to continue his Dhamma sharing today for the benefit of our Dhamma USA community. The topic is, can letting go actually bring true peace? Venerable Sumana, over to you. Thank you so much for coming and joining us tonight, this morning.
Sadhu, sadhu. So today we're going to be talking about if renunciation can, or letting go can truly lead to peace. So why don't we start by reciting Namo Tassa 3 times. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So, the common belief in the world is that when we acquire things, when we accumulate things, then this will lead us to happiness, peace, comfort, and security. So this is the common belief in the world among human beings, is that by acquiring or accumulating things, we will experience happiness, peace, comfort, and security. However, as the Buddha himself discovered, very often when we try to accumulate or acquire things, the opposite is true. In fact, we experience a lot of distress and misery and pain and despair in pursuit of those things. So what normally happens in the world is that people are born, they grow up, and they, even from a very young age, are a lot of the time looking for, fame and money and status. They want to be maybe popular with their friends or their peers at school. And also, even at a young age, a lot of people may already be thinking about what they want to do with their life when they grow up. Maybe they want to be like a firefighter or a police officer or a politician, um, or a business person. And so uh, normally what happens is that human beings are born, and even from a very young age, they start to have uh, this, they're born, and from a very, very young age, even from the time they come out of their mother's womb, they begin to have this very strong tanha, or craving. So, craving most notably for sensual pleasures. So, kama chanda is the Pali uh, term for sensual desire, craving for sensual pleasures. Kama chanda. So, uh, what normally happens is that human beings are born, and right from the time they come out of their mother's womb, they begin to experience, uh, even from the time of conception, actually, we can say, or the time, even while they're in their mother's womb, they begin to experience this very strong tanha, this very strong craving. So, and this very strong dislike or aversion towards unpleasant experiences. So, for example, babies, when they don't get enough food to eat, they may start crying, uh, and they may be very upset. And when they get, small children, when they get maybe candy or some kind of sweet thing, they may be very happy upon, and delightful upon getting that sweet thing. So human beings are, what happens is that human beings are born, but even from the time that they're in their mother's womb, and also, even after they come out of their mother's womb, and even at a young age, they have this very strong tanha, or craving, most notably for sensual pleasures and experiences. And so, um, this craving, this tanha, includes uh, wanting to, you know, maybe this kind of ambition to be famous or wealthy when they grow up, to make lots of money when they grow up, and uh, maybe to have some kind of dream job or dream career when they get older, such as, you know, even from a young age, human beings can be thinking about, what they want to be when they grow up, like a police officer or a firefighter, um, or maybe a politician or a businessman, and um, or a business person. So, in the pursuit of these things, however, in what human beings believe, what the common belief among human beings is that when we get these sensual pleasures, or we get what it is that we want, when we satisfy our craving, then we will be happy, we will be at peace, or, we're looking for peace, but we don't understand that by pursuing these sensual pleasures and experiences and having this very strong craving and longing and wanting, what happens is that oftentimes we experience pain and misery and suffering in pursuit of those things. So the common belief with human beings is that what human beings want is that they want to be they want security. They don't want bad things to happen to them. They don't want to be treated poorly by other human beings, or they want to be treated compassionately by other beings. So they don't want to be treated poorly. They don't want to be treated disrespectfully. They want people to value their work, to value what they do, to uh, maybe see their good qualities. They want maybe people to like them. A lot of the time, this is what human beings normally want: is they want other human beings to like them and have a good opinion of them. So, um, so in the pursuit of these sensual pleasures uh, and sensual experiences, and in the pursuit of things like money and wealth and fame and having a good job or uh, you know, uh, a dream job or a good career, maybe. Um, in the pursuit of these things, human beings want these things, but also they want to experience peace and security and comfort. And so the two sides, the two, we can say, ends conflict with each other. So human beings want to have uh, sensual pleasures and experiences. They have a lot of strong craving for these experiences, but also they want to experience peace and comfort and security. And so, what happens in the pursuit of these sensual pleasures and experiences is that the peace and comfort and security that they're searching for, that human beings are searching for, is lost. So instead of experiencing peace and comfort and security, what human beings instead experience is a lot of pain and grief and misery and suffering. So what the Buddha discovered through his own practice and his own wisdom is that the way to peace and comfort and security is actually renunciation or letting go. So not pursuing sensual pleasures and experiences, giving up tanha or craving for sensual pleasures and experiences, for becoming and non-becoming. Um, Again, kama chanda is the Pali term for sensual desire. Uh, Kama bhava is craving for becoming in Pali, and uh, 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 and or bhava tanha, we can also say. And then vibhava tanha is craving for non-becoming in Pali. So what the Buddha discovered was that this peace through his own practice and wisdom is that renunciation or letting go. So getting rid of sensual desire, giving up the pursuit of sensual pleasures and experiences, giving up the pursuit of becoming and non-becoming. Um, Becoming, we can say, is like wanting to live forever, not wanting to die. craving for becoming. Bhava tanha is, we can say, wanting to live forever, not wanting to die, being afraid of death, wanting to continue living. And that's a good example of bhava tanha, and vibhava tanha, craving for non-becoming. Uh, a good example of this is like nihilism, like believing in annihilation, or uh, maybe we can say also self-mortification, um, suicidal thoughts, or um, wanting to commit suicide. We can say that these are, we can likely say that these are good examples of vibhava tanha, craving for non-becoming. The desire to maybe end one's suffering by killing oneself. So um, the Buddha discovered through his own practice and his own wisdom that the way to peace and comfort and security is actually renunciation or letting go. So giving up sensual desire, giving up craving for becoming, giving up craving for non-becoming, and um, also giving up the pursuit of things like wealth and fame and money and property. So the Buddha talks about in the Udana, there is a sutta um, about a woman, and she's about to deliver her baby, the woman, and she says to her uh, she says to the man, to this man who is presumably her partner. Um, what she says to him is, please go and get some oil for my delivery. So she's about to deliver her baby, and she says to him, please go and get this oil for my delivery. And so the man, what he does is that he knows that the king is giving out oil. Um, he's giving out these there are these things um, that the maybe is like a king's storeroom or something, and things are being given out to these Brahmins and contemplatives. So um, so the man goes to this place and he gets some oil there, and for there's a reason, for some reason he decides to consume the oil. Um, and maybe it's so that he can have enough oil to give to the woman, and he decides to consume it and then vomit it out later. Um, presumably to give it to the woman for her delivery. So then he he swallows this oil, and what happens is that he experiences sharp pains. Maybe he drinks too much of the oil, and he experiences these sharp pains in his stomach. And he's like rolling on the ground. And the Buddha has an exclamation when this happens, and he says, "See him, suffering, one bound in mind, in either body or people." So he's talking about the bondage that this person is experiencing, or he's talking about bondage here, the Buddha. So, and also in the Udana, there are several suttas about the realities related to the realities of householder life, of lay life. So there's a sutta about a woman, uh, whose son dies, or a lay follower whose son dies, and it's the lay follower's only son, and so the son dies, and so then there's a sutta where there is a where there is a uh, where there's a woman named Supavasa, and she's a lay follower of the Buddha, and she's been pregnant for 7 years. And in the sutta, she's in labor and she's trying to give birth. And so she experiences a lot of pain as a result of, being in labor. And so what happens is that she, um, in this sutta, she tells her partner, to go to the Buddha and say to the Buddha that she's inviting him and the community of monks for 7 days of meals. And so the Buddha and his monks, they accept the invitation to Supavasa's 7 days of meals. And so then the Buddha asks her, like, do you want to know? She gives birth to a son, or she gives birth to a child. And she says to the child, she said, and then the Buddha says to her, the Buddha says to Supavasa, do you want another child like this? And she says something like, I want 7 more sons or children like this. Um, and so then the Buddha says, pain in the guise is something to the effect of pain in the guise of bliss um, overcomes one who is heedless. That's how he finishes the stanza that he's saying. He says something to the effect of the disagreeable in the guise of the agreeable, pain in the guise of bliss, overcome one who is heedless. So this is after Subhavasa says that she wants 7 more children, like the child she just had. She was happy because the child was interacting with Venerable Ananda. And so she was happy about that. And so then the uh, she gives she gives birth to the child. Um, the child has this interaction with Venerable Ananda, and then what happens is that she's happy, and then what happens is that the Buddha asks her, "Do you want uh, uh, something like another child like this?" And she says, "I want 7 more children like this." And then the Buddha says, the agreeable in the guise of the disagreeable, the disagreeable in the guise of the agreeable, pain in the guise of bliss, overcome one who is heedless. The disagreeable in the guise of the agreeable, pain in the guise of bliss, overcome one who is heedless. So uh, this there are these suttas in the Udana that describe the difficulties of lay life or householder life. And the Buddha kind of points these things out in these suttas. So, um, so we, so this is, the vast majority of people in the world are doing this. They're pursuing uh, things like wealth and fame. A lot of people in the world are pursuing things like wealth and fame, and money, and having a job, uh, and family, having a family, and having children. And so the Buddha. in these suttas, in the Udana, he's describing the kind of drawbacks of these things, of pursuing these things. And we can see very clearly in these examples, in these suttas from the Udana, the example of the lay follower whose only son died. It was their only son who passed away, their only child. So now they were childless after that. And then the example of Subhavasa having the child, and then but experiencing a lot of pain as a result of giving birth. And then the Buddha at the end of the sutta making the exclamation that the disagreeable in the guise of the agreeable, pain in the guise of bliss, overcome one who is heedless. And describing essentially that someone who doesn't see the drawbacks in these things, such as pursuing like sensual pleasures, and pursuing um, like family and children, and these things that most people in the world are trying to pursue. Someone who doesn't see the drawbacks in these things, um, will be overcome by these things. They will essentially fall victim to these things. So, and then there are some other suttas uh, that we can read. So one of these suttas is from the Anguttara Nikaya. It's from the Tapusa. It's called the Tapusa Sutta. It's titled "With the Householder Tapusa," and so this is from Sutta Central, which is a website that has the suttas for free. And so um, in this sutta, a um, there's a householder named Tapusa, and he goes to the Venerable Ananda, and um, he asks him, or he's speaking to the Venerable Ananda in this sutta, and then they go and see the Buddha after he speaks to Venerable Ananda, and the Buddha um, gives them a teaching. So why don't we read it? So it says, then the Buddha robed up. It says, at one time, the Buddha was staying in the land of the Malas, near the Malian town named Uduvelakapa. Then the Buddha robed up in the morning, and, taking his bowl and robe, entered Uduvelakapa for alms. Then, after the meal, on his return from alms round, he addressed Venerable Ananda. Ananda, you stay right here, while I plunge deep into the great wood for the day's meditation. Then Venerable Ananda says, yes, sir. And then the Buddha plunges into the great wood, and he sits down at the root of a tree for the day's meditation. Then the householder Tapusa goes up to the Venerable Ananda. He bows to him, and he sits down to one side, and he says to the Venerable Ananda, Honorable Ananda, we are lay people who enjoy sensual pleasures. We like sensual pleasures. We love them and take joy in them. But renunciation seems like an abyss. I have heard that in this teaching and training, there are very young mendicants whose minds leap forth, gain confidence, settle down, become decided in renunciation. They see it as peaceful. Renunciation is the dividing line between multitude and the mendicants in this teaching and training. Renunciation is the dividing line between the multitude and the mendicants in this teaching and training. So here the householder Tapusa is saying that renunciation is something essentially that the monks do, the monks and nuns do, whereas the lay people, they don't, they're not living the renunciant life. So they're not. It appears he's saying that they're not practicing renunciation. So he's saying that it's what distinguishes the he's making the distinguishment between amongst it's the dividing line, he says, between the multitude and the mendicants in this teaching and training. So he's saying that the the sangha, the monastics, are practicing renunciation, whereas the lay people are not. So then Venerable Ananda says, householder, we should see the Buddha about this matter. Come, let's go to the Buddha and inform him about this. As he answers, so we'll remember it. So they're going to go to the Buddha, and the Buddha is going to give his answer on this topic. So uh, the householder Tapusa says, yes, sir. And then Ananda, together with Tapusa, goes to the Buddha, and they bow to him. Venerable Ananda and Tapusa, they go to the Buddha together. They bow to him, and they sit down to one side. And Ananda speaks to the Buddha about what has happened, and said, so the Buddha says, that's so true, Ananda, that's so true. Before my awakening, the Buddha says, when I was still unawakened but intent on awakening, I too thought renunciation is good, seclusion is good. But my mind did not leap forth, gain confidence, settle down, and become decided in renunciation. I didn't see it as peaceful. Then I thought, what is the cause? What is the reason why my mind does not leap forth, gain confidence, settle down, and become decided in renunciation? Why don't I see it as peaceful? Then I thought, I haven't seen the drawbacks of sensual pleasures. And so I haven't cultivated that. I haven't realized the benefits of renunciation. And so I haven't developed that. That's why my mind does not leap forth, gain confidence, settle down, and become decided in renunciation. And it's why I don't see it as peaceful. Then I thought, suppose that, seeing the drawbacks of sensual pleasures, I were to cultivate that and were to develop that. And suppose that realizing the benefits of renunciation, I were to develop that. It's possible that my mind would leap forth, gain confidence, settle down, and become decided in renunciation. And I would see it as peaceful. So then it says, and so after the Buddha says, after that, the Buddha says, and so after some time, I saw the drawbacks of sensual pleasures and cultivated that. And I realized the benefits of renunciation and developed that. Then my mind leapt forth, gained confidence, settled down, and became decided in renunciation. I saw it as peaceful. And so, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unskillful qualities. The Buddha says, I entered and remained in the first absorption, which as the rapture and bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind and keeping it connected. While I was in that meditation, perception and focus accompanied by sensual pleasures beset me, and that was an affliction for me. Suppose a happy person were to experience pain, that would be an affliction for them. In the same way, when perception and focus accompanied by sensual pleasures beset me, that was an affliction for me. So the Buddha is talking about his experience, um, and and so the Buddha was explaining here that why he um, the reason why he didn't uh, decide on renunciation is because he hadn't seen the drawbacks of sensual pleasures. So he didn't see it as peaceful. He didn't see it as peace. He didn't see renunciation as peace because he had not yet seen the drawbacks in sensual pleasures. So this is the Buddha's advice this is one of the advices in the Buddhist practice that we are given for giving up kamachanda or sensual desire, for giving up tanha or craving, specifically craving for sensual pleasures. This is one of the pieces of advice that we're given in the Buddhist practice for doing this is seeing the drawbacks in sensual pleasures. So the reason why human beings normally are trying to pursue sensual pleasures and experiences, like having, uh, money, and and not just money. They they may be trying to. A lot of the time, human beings are trying to, we can say, get ahead financially. They want more money, or maybe they want a promotion at their job where they'll get more money. And so human beings, a lot of the time are pursuing, more money than they already have, a better status, maybe at their job or in society than they already have, more fame and notoriety than they already have. Um, and so the reason why they do these things, as we can see from the Buddha and him explaining his experience, was that, or is that, they don't see the drawbacks in sensuality. So they don't see the pain and the misery and the suffering and the grief that is often associated with the pursuit of sensual pleasures and things like wealth and power and fame and money, these things. So most of the time, normally what's happening is that our minds are very strongly craving for these sensual pleasures and experiences. Normally, our minds are very strongly craving for these sensual pleasures and experiences, and things like money and wealth and fame and notoriety, and having people like us and respect us and think that we're a good person. Um, and so, normally, our minds are very strongly craving for these things. And the reason why this happens is because we don't see the drawbacks in the pursuit of these things, as we can see as we can see from the Buddha explaining his experience in this sutta, the Tapusa Sutta. And so, um, this is this is one of the uh, this is one of the pieces of advice that we get in the Buddhist practice for giving up tanha or craving, specifically, uh, most notably, craving for sensual pleasures is seeing the drawbacks in sensual pleasures. So the way that a person can start to see renunciation as peace, from what we can see in this sutta, the Tapusa Sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya, the way a person can begin to see renunciation as peace is by seeing the drawbacks in sensuality. So seeing the kinds of pain and grief and misery, the pain and the pain, grief, and misery that is often associated with the pursuit of sensual pleasures and experiences, and the pain and grief and misery that is often associated with the pursuit of things like, say, advancing in society, having a better status in society, um, uh, with the pursuit of having people like you and respect you all the time, um, and with the pursuit of maybe getting a promotion at one's job and earning more money. So uh, what happens when people become famous is that a lot of the time they're uh, they become very strongly disliked by other people. So when people are famous and they have a lot of status and maybe they have a lot of popularity, maybe they're, you know, when they have, a lot of, when people are famous and they have, status and they're very popular, what happens is that a lot of the time there are other people that very strongly dislike them. So they get criticized by a lot of people. Um, uh, a lot of the time, what happens is that if they make one mistake, like they say one thing wrong that's not, you know, considered appropriate by the wider society, then what happens is that a bunch of people go on their social media accounts, maybe Facebook, Instagram, etc., and criticize them and say bad things about them, or elsewhere say bad things about them, and so this is what happens a lot of the time with people who are famous and who are wealthy and who have status. Is that certainly with people who are famous is that they get criticized by other people, and more so, we can say than people who are not famous, because they have so much attention on them. So many people, them being famous, they have many people paying attention to them. So uh, it's likely that they get more criticism than the average person who is not famous. They have more bad things said about them than the average person who is not famous. And a lot of the time, when a person who has a lot of fame, when they make one little mistake, we can say like they don't speak out on a particular topic or issue, when they don't maybe campaign for something, when they don't maybe try to make other people famous, uh, if they have a good amount of money, if they don't try to give their money to other people, some of their money to other people, what happens is that they start getting criticized and ridiculed by other people. So they start having bad things said about them. So actually, uh, many people in the world, they want to pursue fame. They want to be famous. They want people to pay attention to them, and they want people to like them and respect them. And there is likely this belief that a lot of people in the world have, that people normally have. The belief is likely that, but the belief that they have is likely that people normally have is likely that once I am famous, then people will like me and respect me, and then I'll be liked and respected by other people, and all of my problems will go away. So, but what happens is that when a person pursues these things, like fame and status and notoriety. What happens when a person pursues these things is that a lot of the time they get uh, very harshly criticized by other people over uh, things such as maybe not speaking out about a particular topic or issue, not campaigning for something. Essentially, when they make a mistake, we can say, uh, they do something that is considered socially unacceptable or not acceptable by the wider society, then they get very harshly criticized. And so the way the mind normally is that the mind desires fame. It wants people, the people are, with this desire for fame, what happens is that when a person pursues fame, is that instead of having people, and when a person acquires fame, instead of people liking and respecting the person all the time, what happens is a lot of the time, actually, people dislike them. And so fame doesn't necessarily having fame doesn't necessarily cause a person to become liked or respected by other people. If anything, it just brings more negative attention on them, and people dislike them. And there are people that want to even, harm them or injure them or kill them. So uh, the attention that they get, the attention that fame brings a person, a lot of the times is actually negative. It's not actually positive. So, um, and so also there are these famous people we read about who they, they commit suicide. They have mental health issues like depression, and um, there are famous people, who commit suicide or um, who are murdered by other people. So famous people also people who when just because a person acquires fame doesn't necessarily mean that they will experience this peace and security that human beings are normally looking for. That human beings desire. Human beings desire peace and security and comfort. And so the pursuit of fame doesn't necessarily lead a person, or the acquiring of fame does not necessarily lead a person to peace and security and comfort. So, in fact, being famous usually causes a person to receive a lot of negative attention. Uh, if they have a lot of money, then there are people that will want to steal their money and take their property from them. So, um, they also, there are, they can still experience mental health issues like depression and suicidal thoughts. So, and drug addiction, drug and alcohol addiction as well. So, um, this belief, as we can see, this belief that being famous from these things in the world, what we can see is that this belief that being famous or having fame will bring a person peace, security, and comfort is actually false. So we can see from these things in the world that acquiring fame does not necessarily uh, bring a person peace and security and comfort. In fact, a lot of the time, it just brings them more problems and more misery. So there's a sutta where the Buddha is speaking to one of his monks, uh, and or he's speaking to some person, and he says, uh, essentially, may I never be famous. And he describes being fame. He describes fame as being a lowly pleasure, or a vile pleasure. So, because the Buddha had discovered through his own practice and his own wisdom that being famous actually, instead of bringing peace and security and comfort, in fact, what it does a lot of the time is it just brings people more problems and more misery and suffering in their lives. So, so then the we can go to another sutta, which is the Salyatana Vibhanga Sutta, and this is from the Majjhima Nikaya. So the Buddha in this sutta, he talks about uh, these two kinds of happiness: domestic happiness and renunciant happiness. And he also talks about two kinds of sadness: domestic sadness and renunciant sadness. So we can read some passages from this sutta. It's called the Salyatana Vibhanga Sutta. It's from the Majjhima Nikaya. So this is again from Sutta Central, which is a website that contains the suttas for free. So it says, and in this context, what are the 6 kinds of domestic happiness? There are sites known there's and what it says in this context, what are the 6 kinds of domestic happiness? There are sights known by the eye, which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasing, connected with the worldly pleasures of the flesh. Happiness arises when you regard it as a gain to obtain such sights, or when you recollect sights you formerly obtained that have passed, ceased, and perished. Such happiness is called domestic happiness. There are sounds known by the ear, smells known by the nose, tastes known by the tongue, touches known by the body, ideas known by the mind, which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasing, connected with the worldly pleasures of the flesh. Happiness arises when you regard it as a gain to obtain such ideas, or when you recollect ideas you formerly obtained that have passed, ceased, and perished. Such happiness is called domestic happiness. These are the 6 kinds of domestic happiness. So it says, and in this context, what are the 6 kinds of domestic happiness? There are sights known by the eye which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasing, connected with the worldly pleasures of the flesh. Happiness arises when you regard it as a gain to obtain such sights, or when you recollect sights you formerly obtained that have passed, ceased, and perished. So here he's talking about sensual pleasures. Here it's talking about sensual pleasures in the form of sights, pleasing, or we can say agreeable sights. And so it says, happiness arises when you regard it as a gain to obtain such sights. So when a person has the wrong view that these sights are likable and agreeable and pleasing, then they crave for these sights. They have this tanha, or this craving, this kamachanda, or sensual desire for these agreeable sights, these pleasing and agreeable sights. And so it also says that happiness arises when you regard it as a gain to obtain such sights, or when you recollect sights you formerly obtained that have passed, ceased, and perished. So here, what it's talking about is, reminiscing on previous sensual experiences uh, connected to beautiful sights or agreeable or pleasing sights. So recollecting those experiences will bring a person happiness if they have the wrong view that these sights are likable, agreeable, and pleasing. So, and at the end of the sutta, it says towards the end of this passage, it says such happiness is called domestic happiness. These are the 6 kinds of domestic happiness. So, undoubtedly, the sutta, what is being described in the sutta, is that this kind of happiness, such as uh, pleasing or agreeable or beautiful sights, is worldly happiness. It's you know it's uh, it's sensuality. It's worldly happiness. So uh, it's the kind of happiness that is um, that the mind normally seeks. This is the kind of happiness that the mind normally is searching for or seeking. Is this kind of worldly or sensual happiness, we can say. And so, and then it goes on to say, and in this context, what are the 6 kinds of renunciant happiness? When you've understood the impermanence of sights, their perishing, fading away, and cessation, happiness arises as you truly understand through right understanding that both formerly and now all those sights are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. Such happiness is called renunciant happiness. When you've understood the impermanence of sounds, smells, tastes, touches, ideas, their perishing, fading away, and cessation, happiness arises as you truly understand, through right understanding, that both formerly and now all those ideas are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. Such happiness is called renunciant happiness. These are the 6 kinds. These are the 6 kinds of renunciant happiness. So it's in this passage describing a different kind of happiness. So, as it's described in the sutta, renunciant happiness. So here it's describing renunciant happiness in this passage of the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta. And renunciant happiness is a different kind of happiness, uh, as we can uh, as we can probably understand from reading this passage. Renunciant happiness is a different kind of happiness, and it's not the kind of happiness that most people in the world that people normally are searching for. Renunciant happiness is not the kind of happiness uh, that people are normally searching for. That beings in the world are normally searching for. They're not searching for this renunciant happiness most of the time. So, uh, so this happiness, renunciant happiness, is a different kind of happiness, And it's the happiness, as we can likely understand from reading this passage, it's the happiness of peace. It's the happiness of peace and security. So it's, again, as we can understand likely from reading this passage, it's a different kind of happiness from the worldly or sensual happiness that the mind is normally searching for or seeking after, um, which is described in this sutta as domestic happiness. So, like, kind of like, we can maybe say, like, the happiness of the household happiness, or the happiness associated with household life, domestic happiness. So, um, then it goes on to say, and in this context, what are the 6 kinds of domestic sadness? There are sights known by the eye, which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasing, connected with the worldly pleasures of the flesh. Sadness arises when you regard it as a loss to lose such sights, or when you recollect sights you formerly lost that have passed, ceased, and perished. Such sadness is called domestic sadness. There are sounds known by the ear. There are smells known by the nose. There are tastes known by the tongue. There are touches known by the body. There are ideas known by the mind, which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasing, connected with the worldly pleasures of the flesh. Sadness arises when you regard it as a loss to lose such ideas, or when you recollect ideas you formerly lost that have passed, ceased, and perished. Such sadness is called domestic sadness. These are the 6 kinds of domestic sadness. So again, here it's talking about sights that are likable, desirable, agreeable, and pleasing. You know, beautiful sights. And um, domestic sadness here, an example of domestic sadness here is, uh, here it says, sadness arises when you regard it as a loss to lose such sights, or when you recollect sights you formerly lost that have passed, ceased, and perished. So then it says such sadness is called domestic sadness. So a person has a, maybe they see like uh, a kind of beautiful looking person or a handsome looking person, and then that person goes away, or that person isn't interested in them and they're interested in someone else. So the person who wants that beautiful or handsome looking person, that's their sight, the sight of a beautiful or handsome looking person. Um, that's their pleasing sight, or agreeable or likable sight, is a handsome looking or beautiful looking person. And so when they lose that sight, you know, when that sight goes away, the person goes away, what happens? Well, a lot of the time, likely what's going to happen is that the person is going to continue thinking about that person. They're going to continue fantasizing about them, thinking about them, oh, how beautiful or handsome they look, this kind of a thing. And even after the person, the beautiful or handsome looking person, has gone away, maybe, you know, they once they've gone somewhere else, then the person who enjoyed looking at them, or enjoyed the sight of them, uh, this person, uh, very likely they're going to continue to think about this beautiful or handsome looking person even after they've left, even after they've gone. So, uh, so this is described in this passage. This kind of a thing is described in this passage um, of the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta as domestic sadness. So the sadness connected with losing likable, agreeing, or pleasable. The sadness connected with losing likable, agreeable, or pleasing sights. In the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, here in this passage, in the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, this kind of sadness is described as being domestic sadness, the sadness that the mind normally experiences, the sadness of losing likable, agreeable, pleasing things. Most notably, we can say sensual pleasures and experiences. So, and then the sutta goes on to say, and in this context, what are the 6 kinds of renunciant sadness? When you've understood the impermanence of sights, their perishing, fading away, and cessation, you truly understand through right understanding that both formerly and now, all those sights are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. Upon seeing this, you give rise to yearning for the supreme liberation. Oh, when will I enter and remain in the same dimension that the noble ones enter and remain in today? When you give rise to the yearning for the supreme liberation, like this, sadness arises because of the yearning. Such sadness is called renunciant sadness. When you've understood the impermanence of sounds, smells, tastes, touches, ideas, their perishing, fading away, and cessation, you truly understand through right understanding that both formerly and now, all those ideas are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. Upon seeing this, you give rise to yearning for the supreme liberation. Oh, when will I enter and remain in the same dimension that the noble ones enter and remain in today? When you give rise to yearning for the supreme liberation like this, sadness arises because of the yearning. Such sadness is called renunciant sadness. These are the 6 kinds of renunciant sadness. So here, in this passage, it's describing what is called renunciant sadness. So this is sadness. So previously, we were talking about um, uh, we were talking about uh, what is described in the previous passage of the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta as domestic sadness. Uh, and so now what we're talking about here is the what is described in the following passage of the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta as renunciant happiness. So, as we can tell from these passages, these 2 passages of the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, what we can tell from reading these 2 passages is that domestic sadness is the kind of sadness that the mind normally experiences. So, the sadness associated with losing sensual pleasures like beautiful sights and sounds and smells and tastes and touches and thoughts. And uh, we don't necessarily have to describe this sadness. It can be actual sadness and grief, but also we can describe this sadness, we can also probably describe this sadness, domestic sadness, as tanha, or craving for these things again and again and again. So, for example, uh, seeing a beautiful looking person, then they go away, and then the mind continues to think about that beautiful person over and over and over again. And it won't stop fantasizing and thinking about that beautiful looking person. So this can be that thinking about the beautiful person over and over and over again can be described also as domestic sadness. Uh, you know, the having this desire and this this desire for the sight of the beautiful person again, or this desire to think about them, think about them over and over and over again. This can also be described as domestic sadness. So, and then, so after the sutta describes, after the sutta has this passage where it describes domestic sadness, it goes on in the next passage to describe renunciant sadness, what is described as renunciant sadness. And so this is, as we can see from reading this passage in the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, what we can see from reading this passage is that renunciant sadness is a different kind of sadness, that it's different than the kind of sadness the mind normally experiences. So the mind normally experiences sadness based on, or sadness coming from, we can say, the loss of sensual pleasures and experiences, the loss of things like money and wealth and status and fame, the loss of these things. Whereas renunciant sadness is a different kind of sadness from the sadness that the mind normally experiences, as we can tell from reading this passage in the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta. Renunciant sadness, as we can tell from reading this passage, is the kind of sadness associated with being disillusioned with the world. So it's the kind of sadness that is associated with disenchantment or disaffection. So, for example, when the Buddha was a prince and he was 29 years old, he went outside of his palace and uh, he was with his charioteer Chana, and he ventured outside of the palace with Chana. And he saw, when he went outside of the palace at age 29, he saw these four sights that he had never seen before. Um, and uh, so he saw four sights, and the four sights were an old person, they were a sick person. Those four sights were an old person, a sick person, a dead corpse, and an ascetic in the forest practicing meditation. So, like a renunciant, a monk. So, when the Buddha saw these four sights, he had never seen, an old person like aging before. He had never seen aging. He had never seen, uh, he had never seen when he saw these four sights. He saw an aging person or an old person. He saw a sick person. He saw a dead corpse, and he saw an ascetic in the forest practicing meditation. And so he never knew before he saw these four sights that he was going to get old, get sick, and die. And so this caused him a lot of sadness and a lot of grief. And he lost his desire, uh, maybe it was to eat. He lost his desire to uh, probably be entertained. He had these dancers and entertainers who used to entertain him. Um, and so, from what we, so when he saw these four sights, the old person, the sick person, the dead corpse, and the ascetic in the forest practicing meditation, when he saw these four sights, he became what we would call disenchanted. It led to him feeling disenchantment or disaffection with the world. So the same thing as what the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta here is describing, at least in this passage of the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, it's describing this thing called renunciant sadness. So this is the same thing as that. The Buddha's feelings of disenchantment and disaffection with the world, and with worldly and sensual pleasures after seeing the four sights: the old person, the sick person, the dead corpse, and the ascetic in the forest practicing meditation. So, so this is this renunciant sadness that is being described here in the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta. It's a different kind of sadness from the sadness that the mind normally experiences. The mind normally experiences sadness that is the result of losing things, like losing money, wealth, a job, losing fame, losing followers, etc. And so that's the kind of sadness that the mind normally experiences. Whereas renunciant sadness is a different kind of sadness, as we can see from the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta. Renunciant sadness is what we can describe as disenchantment or disaffection with the world and with worldly and sensual pleasures. And uh, you know, disaffection, disenchantment and disaffection with the things that human beings normally pursue, such as, a job, money, wealth, status, fame, uh, a family, children, etc. So uh, this, as we can understand from the Buddhist teachings, uh, this is the kind of sadness that leads to peace. So, renunciant sadness or disenchantment or disaffection, this is the kind of sadness, as the Buddha himself would say, this is the kind of sadness that leads to peace, that leads to security. Because when a person has this kind of sadness, this renunciant sadness, or this disenchantment or disaffection, what happens when a person has this disenchantment or disaffection or renunciant sadness is that they stop is that they lose their desire to pursue sensual pleasures and experiences. And they lose their desire for the things that human beings normally desire to pursue. When a person experiences renunciant sadness or disenchantment or disaffection, they lose their desire for pursuing, they lose their desire to pursue the things that, they lose their desire to pursue the things that human beings normally want to pursue. They lose their desire to pursue the things that human beings normally want to pursue. So, what this does is that this allows, this would maybe, this would allow them to see that pursuing these kinds of things like sensual pleasures and experiences and things like, having a job and having, money and maybe being wealthy or famous, these kinds of things, maybe this disenchantment or disaffection would allow the person to see that pursuing these things is actually the result of most of their sadness and grief and pain and misery in life. So uh, there was a saying by Ajahn Chah, and Ajahn Chah was saying that there are, essentially what he was saying was that there are two different kinds of pain, and he was saying that uh, there's one kind of pain that leads to there's one kind of pain that leads to further pain, and then there is another kind of pain that leads to freedom from pain. So uh, this is something that Ajahn Chah used to talk about as well. He talked about this as well, that essentially that there are two kinds of pain, one that leads to further pain and another one that leads to freedom from pain, another kind of pain. So um, so the main thing that a person needs to begin seeing if they want to experience more peace in their, if a person wants to begin experiencing lasting peace, first what they need to do is they need to begin seeing the drawbacks in sensual pleasures and experiences and the drawbacks in the pursuit of things like wealth and money and fame and status. And they need to start seeing that the pursuit of these things actually leads to a lot of grief and pain and misery, as opposed to uh, happiness and uh, comfort and uh, security and enjoyment as the mind normally believes. So from there, a person can, once they've seen the drawbacks in these things, and they've seen how these things actually are pursuing, how the pursuit of these things actually is the main cause of their grief and sadness and pain and suffering in life, once they've seen that, then they can begin to let go of these things. So once the person begins to develop the wisdom uh, that these things, that pursuing these things like wealth and fame and money and a job and status and a family and children, once a person begins to see the pursuit of these things is the main cause of their is why they're experiencing so much. Once the person begins to see that the pursuit of these things is causing their a lot of their grief and sadness and pain and misery in life, when they begin to see that, then they can begin to let go. They can, once they have that wisdom, once they have the wisdom to see that when they pursue these things, that they actually experience a lot of pain and sadness and grief and misery, suffering, dukkha, as opposed to happiness and comfort and security, then they can begin to let go of their tanha or craving for these things. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bhante, for this wonderful Dhamma talk on renunciation and letting go. And I hope it was helpful to all our viewers. And we wish you actually a long life and good health to continue your Dhamma services. And with that, we would like to conclude our session. We will be seeing you again with another Dhamma talk, right?
Yes, March 14th.
March 14, okay. So till then, we will say goodbye to our Sunday Dhamma Talk series audience, and looking forward to seeing you all with another Sunday Dhamma Talk with Bhante American Sumana on March 14th. And March 14th or March 15th, I guess. Should be March 15th, I think.
15th, yeah.
Yeah. All right. With that, we conclude today's session. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bhante Sumana, for your kindness and also explaining, especially the two suttas, Taposa Sutta and Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, regarding the renunciation. I hope it will help our audience so much. And may you all be well, happy, healthy, sukhi, dighayu ko bhava. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.